The state of open source nonlinear video editing on Linux is pretty good. Your needs are pretty basic. Two reasonably good editors exist. Kdenlive and Olive, these both work fine. But Kdenlive's UI is strange. It can be a little crashy. Olive's no longer maintained by its author. I hope somebody else picks that up. I really like Olive. There's a number of other contenders, but they all have one fatal flaw or another. I knew about DaVinci Resolve. I'd even used it to make one video about a year or two ago. I used it on Linux. The videos I make are basically OBS screen recordings with me talking over top of them, and then I just need to cut them up, render the results, and publish it on YouTube. Incredibly basic. So the import and export quirks of Resolve made me bounce off of it. But then I saw a YouTube video that showed the audio transcription and text editing features of Resolve Studio 18.5 and better. And I knew I must reinvestigate the quirks and if possible circumvent them and possibly possess it. There has seemingly always been a barely traversable minefield of gotchas around using DaVinci Resolve on Linux. The minefield itself is truly a work of art. It has that, you Linux trash are not our target market, so here, why don't you spend an entire day figuring out whether it'll work at all for you. After you understand the minefield, depending on your level of submissiveness, you will find that it may or may not be suitable for you. Oh, and by the way, it doesn't matter if you want to pay money for it. You're a Linux user. Doesn't matter how many thousands of dollars you might performatively wave around. Real video editors use Mac. Second-class ones use Windows. We don't even know what class you're in, you fucking weirdo. This is ironic because I believe DaVinci Resolve was originally a Linux-only product. These days, it's only $300 for a forever license. So I guess some cost-cutting concessions had to be made. Linux feature parity with its Mac and Windows variants seems to have been one. Now, apparently, I'm the bottom in this relationship because I ended up buying Resolve Studio. Most of what I'm going to mention in this relates to the Studio version, the paid version, although I will discuss the differences between Resolve and Resolve Studio when it comes to feature parity as I've encountered them. Let's talk about the minefield of gotchas. I really should make some sort of chart for this, but I'm way too lazy. Here's what does not work on Linux or Windows in any version of Resolve. Any system without discrete graphics, meaning a dedicated GPU. I'm not even sure they consider Intel Arc a discrete GPU. I'm not sure. As far as I can tell, Resolve requires an AMD or NVIDIA card, and really, in practice, an NVIDIA card. And really, in practice, a really beefy NVIDIA card, not some wimpy one. More on this in a bit. Here's what doesn't work on Linux or Windows in DaVinci Resolve. These do work in the Studio version, the paid version. H.264 video decoding, H.265 video decoding, H.264 video encoding, H.265 video encoding, audio transcription, text editing, and some other AI features. Here's what doesn't work on Linux, either in the free or the paid versions. AAC audio decoding, meaning importing clips that have AAC audio, like every phone or camera produces. AAC audio encoding, like YouTube wants. Accelerated video encoding on AMD GPUs, and possibly accelerated video decoding on AMD GPUs. If you're producing content mostly for YouTube, using Resolve on Linux is less convenient than using it on a PC or Mac because of the non-support of AAC audio. You almost always have to transcode your content for import because most consumer cameras and phones produce H.264 video with AAC audio in an MP4 container. And neither Resolve nor Resolve Studio on Linux can cope with it. Are we starting to get the picture? If you produce footage with OBS, it can be convinced to use a Matroska container, an MKV container, instead of an MP4 container. But it can only encode to AAC or Opus, meaning OGG, audio. Resolve can't use AAC or Opus audio, so like camera footage, transcode it you must. If you are an AMD user on Linux, you must use the proprietary AMD GPU Pro drivers. These are not the open source drivers that ship in the kernel. They are the drivers that AMD supplies from their website. They are apparently crap for gaming. As far as I can tell, you must have a video card for any accelerated encoding of video, and I think maybe even accelerated decoding of video, like playback, not sure. They seem to rely on CUDA, which is an NVIDIA thing, heavily for many features. I don't have an AMD card to use to confirm this. Since Intel Macs have always had AMD graphics cards, Why there's no accelerated video encoding or decoding, who knows? So we've discovered that we should have an NVIDIA card in practice. What's that you say? Oh, you have a GTX 1030. Oh, well, fuck you, you poor. That only has 2 gigabytes of RAM on it. Resolve won't even get out of bed unless you have 4 gigabytes of RAM on your GPU. And that's the very minimum, like scraping the barrel minimum. This means that you need at least a GTX 1050 Ti or a Quadro P1000. No, fuck you, it won't fall back to software for this stuff. Your 64 gigs of system RAM is useless. Hey, great. Now you have a 4 gigabyte GPU. You can actually start Resolve and enter its UI. You can even start to edit things. With only 4 gigabytes of GPU RAM, its tendency will be to complain at you incessantly and refuse to complete most minimally complex previewing, AI, and rendering tasks without workarounds or magical incantations, and maybe not even then. You really should have at least 8 gigabytes of GPU RAM. And that's really only for basic editing with a single track on the timeline at 1080p without any effects. Now, if you want effects and you want to edit in 4K, fuck you. Buy a current gen NVIDIA GPU with 24 gigs of RAM in it for, let's say, $600, $700, $800, or $1,000. And hey, by the way, Resolve is officially only supported on Linux via CentOS. No, you heard that right. Yeah, that's CentOS, yeah. Yeah, Red Hat, the one that they no longer support. Now, unofficially, Blackmagic supports it on Rocky Linux, at least via its forums. There are probably unofficial packagings of Resolve for all the popular Linux distros. Some poor soul has even spent a lot of time to containerize it. It has come to that. However, in practice, I think the easiest distribution to use DaVinci Resolve, both the free and the paid versions on, are ironically NixOS. Both of these pieces of software have been packaged for NixOS thanks to the hard work of people named Josh Campbell, I'm reading his handle, and Oriv J, not sure who that is. But thanks to their hard work, if you use NixOS, you needn't think about Rocky Linux, containers, or any of it. You just add DaVinci Resolve or DaVinci Resolve Studio to your system packages, and it works. The current version package for NixOS is 18.6.5. I told you it was complicated. Now we've gotten through the minefield. On the other side of this minefield, we have another minefield. While traipsing around in the previous minefield, you may have come to terms with the fact that we must transcode input footage. That might be okay with you. I use the studio version Resolve, so I transcode my input footage to H.264 with PCM audio into a Matroska, an MKV container. Resolve Studio is fine with that. I do this because I have an NVIDIA card, a Quadro P1000, that does hardware accelerated H.264 encoding via NVENC. This combination of video and audio encoders produces a reasonably small transcode reasonably quickly. I will show some FFmpeg commands to transcode any MP4 into a Matroska container with H.264 video and PCM audio. Now, if I were using the free version, I would not be able to use H.264 as an input video format. The previous command that I showed you, the previous FFmpeg command, would not produce something that Resolve could import. I have found through trial and error that instead I would want to use AV1 video encoding. It's slower, but Resolve can import the result. Here's a suitable FFmpeg command line to transcode any MP4 video into a Matroska container that uses AV1 video and PCM audio. I would also want to use AV1 video if I didn't have hardware accelerated H.264 encoding. This libsvt-AV encoder is surprisingly faster than the software H.264 encoder, at least on my machine, and at least for the kinds of footage that I'm transcoding. Okay, you pleb, we're about ready to fire up Resolve. We've transcoded our footage. And look what I found, some other mines. Resolve badly wants to be used in a dual monitor setup. It wants to consume an entire monitor for itself. It always starts at full screen size, and it wants that monitor to be at least 4K resolution on Linux. If it's not, bizarre shit happens, like at 1080p, where menus, the menu bar, and the titles of the menu bar are cut off. Some UI elements are simply unclickable because they're off screen and you can't drag windows. So for all you people who want to use 1080p, fuck you and your 2016 era resolution, which is ironic on Linux at least, because When it is at 4K, it's totally unreadable. You have to go to the preferences, user, UI settings, UI display scale, and change it to 150%. Fuck you. Okay, so now you have a 4K monitor and you figured out how to scale the UI so you can actually read it. But you only have one monitor. Oh, you poor bastard. You'll want to resize the Resolve window. Well, fuck you. Figure out that you need to drag it out of full window mode by holding down the super key and left dragging the title bar. Oh, and hey, figure out that after you snap it out of its full screen mode, you still need to use the super key to drag it around while you hold its title bar. And while it's not full screen, fuck you. The UI might or might not be usable due to inconsistent scaling. And we won't respect your desktop's window decorations. You won't even get a close button. You don't need one. Fuck you. So you've imported some video, and hey, maybe you want to record a voiceover. Maybe you want to do that right in Resolve. Resolve has this awesome audio suite named Fairlight that is capable of recording audio. But on Linux, I hope you like all your audio inputs named ALSA. Literally ALSA, with no way to distinguish them apart. Blackmagic has renamed them, so they don't even bear a relationship to the output of like A-play-L. Well, so fuck you. Try all of them. What's that you say? You tried all of them and none of them seem to work? Fuck you. Use Audacity, you loser. So we've managed to produce something with both video and audio in it. And we want to render our content for upload to YouTube. Well, YouTube is optimized for H.264 video and AAC audio in an MP4 container. You'll remember in one of our minefields that we can't use AAC on Linux because fuck you. And we can't put MP3 or PCM audio in an MP4 container inside of DaVinci Resolve because fuck you again. So I render to H.264 video and MP3 audio in a Matroska container because all my systems can accelerate H.264 rendering, and YouTube is fine with this. I have no need to transcode what Resolve shits out before uploading it to YouTube. Your mileage may vary. My needs are very basic. I don't even use stereo sound. Another option would be a QuickTime container with H.264 and MP3 or PCM audio. But the Matroska thing with H.264 and MP3 work for me. Once you have a render, if you were using Resolve under Windows or Mac OS, you could use Resolve itself to upload your video to YouTube. That'd be pretty cool. But that doesn't work on Linux because fuck you one last time. Use a web UI, you monkey. So was it worth it? Yeah. I'm afraid so. Resolve has features I love. The editing features, they're really great. The way you edit audio and video is fantastic. It has a nice audio normalization feature that lets you just click a button and it will make your audio what YouTube wants. The audio transcription, a text editing feature, is amazing. On my system, because I'm a pleb and I have a 4 gigabyte Quadro P1000, it often runs out of GPU memory while I'm using the audio transcription feature. Changing my desktop resolution to 1080p instead of 4K gives it enough headroom to finish most transcription jobs. I can then change back to 4K to actually edit the video. I think I've also seen it get enough headroom to finish by changing the GPU processing mode to OpenCL, although it goes much slower. It's not using CUDA, but that might have been a fluke. It's clown cars to use Resolve in 1080p. It barely works, but fuck you. One other benefit to it, and this may be the killer benefit, I'm afraid to say. There are a billion tutorials on YouTube by 20-somethings with bokeh backgrounds and shitty USB mics and peppy copyright-free music trying to sell me garbage that are actually very useful. There's strength in numbers. So yeah, it was worth it for me, if only for the audio transcription and text editing features. I feel shame, but it was worth it.